All right, guys, today we're looking at Matthew 1 as well as part of Luke 2, and we have some serious biblical controversy to deal with right away.
So I've read a lot of the New Testament before. I've read these genealogies. One thing that's exciting about reading the genealogies this time around, however, is that the names that I used to always stumble over or not have familiarity with, they were not as crazy this time around because I've heard them 1,000 times reading the Old Testament. And I remember like specific stories that we've read about, or like, oh, that was a really good guy, or oh, that was not such a great guy. But seeing how those genealogies are so important in context of the Old Testament. But one thing that really struck me was as we were reading through Matthew is where the genealogy is listed for this reading. It said, it basically led down to Joseph. It says in verse 16, and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. So there's like this weird muddled part for me that was like, wait, did they just pull that whole lineage from Abraham to Joseph? And Joseph's not even his actual physical father? That seems very strange to me. So I guess Ryan did some digging because it still is a little confusing to me. And it actually was like kind of frustrating. Like, wait, I was waiting for it to say Mary, his mother.
So this is a pretty significant Bible controversy. If you are if you're around Bible study, or if you have been a skeptic in the past, you probably have come across this argument that these genealogies are a little bit of a mess. They're not a complete mess. They just generate a lot of questions because of how they're put together. And when you compare the two, they're not the same. So Luke has a genealogy for Jesus. It happens in Luke chapter 3, verse 23, which we won't read today, but we will in a couple days. Yeah. Matthew starts right off with a genealogy. I am not going to completely solve this issue for you if you're looking at these genealogies and you're like, oh man, I don't think the Bible's even real. What I am going to do is give you some tools that you need to be able to make a decision on this. So we, Jenny and I, we believe that the Bible is God's word. We believe that it's true. We believe that it's valuable for all the things. So this is not a significant concern to us, but it has been a significant concern to people in the past. And I understand if you're trying to be a careful student of the word, you might be concerned about it as well. So
it might just catch your attention like it did mine today.
Yeah, like, hey, what's up with this? So the pointed question that Jenny asked is, if Jesus is to be like the Messiah, basically, like, why aren't they tracing Mary's lineage instead of Joseph's? Because the only person that has any DNA in this game, I guess, is Mary and the Holy Spirit. So Joseph isn't really a dad anyway. Right? Is that fair?
Yep, that's pretty much where I was at. Like,
so,
wait.
This is a controversy. There's lots of scholarship on it. I'm not going to solve all of it. You can go look up plenty of it for yourself. The first thing is that you need to look at what these guys are trying to do. So Matthew is trying to establish Jesus as the King of Israel, Messiah, according to Isaiah 11. So what Matthew is going to do is track the kingly line of Jesus' family. What Luke is going to do is track the legal line of Jesus' family, because he's tracking his legal authority, not necessarily his kingly authority. And so there are different purposes here. We've talked about how Luke is kind of he's a smart guy. He's a doctor. He's a little bit more schooled in the ways of the culture. Matthew is a Jewish author. We're going to see many times where Matthew is very aware of Jewish scriptures. He's very aware of Jewish expectations. And so he is going to be making a Jewish case for Jesus, which is why Matthew wants to establish Jesus as David and Abraham's son. Luke is more concerned with the world broader, and so Luke is that
the broader world?
The broader world. So Luke is going to trace Jesus all the way back to Adam instead. He's also establishing Jesus as a second Adam, a more perfect Adam, and so that is why he's going to track all the way back to Adam. The second problem with these genealogies is basically Matthew says 3 14s. 14 before the exile, 14 during the exile, 14 after the exile. That's how many generations. That doesn't actually make sense because there's a lot more time between than just 14 generations. Matthew is, again, concerned about establishing the kingship, not like the actual I don't know how you would say that. Like he's not getting mired in the details. So there's definitely names that are missing, and there are names in there that we're not even sure how he got them. Most likely he got them from like public records or
We talked
something.
about how Luke is very much like you were saying earlier. He's like a much more detail
Hmm.
oriented guy. So and we said that in our, well, yesterday's episode.
Yep.
He's very much more concerned about those small little things, whereas others may be like, okay, like hop, skip, and a jump later. Here we are.
Correct. So, to talk about the Mary issue specifically, in the culture, again, Matthew is writing to Jews about Jewish things that they're concerned about. They would have been concerned about kingly authority, and kingly authority comes only through men. So you wouldn't have been able to make a case that Jesus was a king through Mary because nobody would consider Jesus a king through his mom. That's not how kings become kings. And so he's saying that David's descendant is Jesus through this line of kings. And so he's not going to spend time talking about Mary because Mary is not a way to become a king. Luke, again, is going to make the case through Joseph. But what's interesting is that many people have looked at this genealogy of Luke and tried to say that this is actually Mary's genealogy. He's basically just using Joseph as like a cover over the family, but tracing Mary's actual genealogy. There's a lot of problems with that because why would he say that this is Joseph's genealogy, but actually mean Mary's? That's kind of confusing. The easier way to look at this is that we know that Mary is related to Elizabeth, who is married to a priest, which means that they are descendants of that priestly line.
The Levitical line.
Exactly. So we know that Mary does have priestly heritage. And while it might not be spelled out, it's clear that she would because she's like in that like priestly family.
Priesthood.
Exactly. And so, like I said, you can do a lot of reading on this. You can do a lot of scholarship on this. There is a lot of cases made throughout history. You can go way, way back. Like Augustine actually has a case that Joseph had two parents. Well, obviously he had two parents. Joseph had like a blended family through levirate marriage where like your husband dies and you have to marry the relative of your husband, which is why he has different names and different people. I say that not to confuse you or anything, just to tell you that like this has been something that people have been trying to figure out like literally since there's been Christians.
Oh, yeah. So, we're done with the genealogy.
Does that help you at all?
It does.
It just feels like too Bible nerdy.
It's a lot. So, anyway, that is helpful. But then we move into Luke, which is interesting for me because I'm used to, like we said yesterday, I Bible quiz, so I'm used to the NIV version. So if you hear me stumbling through, disregard. But anyway, I actually read this. So this would be the first time I've ever read this specific portion of Luke post reading the entire Old Testament. And typically when we hear most of chapter 2 about the birth of Jesus, his coming, his arrival, we often think of like, at least I do, Christmas time, and we like dust this story off in December. And it felt so different this time around because it's not just like, this isn't just a Christmas story. This isn't just what we read in December. It actually has so much meaning. And I think as we read about Simeon and Anna, the prophet and prophetess that had been also anticipating the arrival of Jesus when they were coming, they meaning Mary and Joseph and Jesus, when they were coming to Jerusalem to offer the sacrifice for Jesus. It was very, like, it was crazy to me to like think about their perspective again, having read the Old Testament after all these years of like what we talked about the other day, those silent years of not really hearing anything from the Lord, but these people who are super steadfast in their belief and their trust in what the Lord is going to do. And then finally seeing Jesus like walking up those steps. It's so awesome to like hear the excitement, the amazement. I guess just like feeling the faithfulness of God and what he said he would do. It's really encouraging and it's super cool. And I think it changes my perspective of even like what we celebrate and why we do and all the things. It's pretty cool.
There's a couple interesting little side notes in this story. One, Mary and Joseph have to go to the temple to like offer sacrifices. That's according to Leviticus 12. And when they offer, it's like 2 young doves, I think.
It's pigeons,
Or
isn't
pigeons,
it?
yeah. This
We
is
talked about that before,
chapter
too.
2, verse 24. And to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. This offering that they're giving is the offering for poor people. Like it's like a special provision that God made for people who can't afford costly
And
sacrifices.
we would have talked about that way back because I
Way
think we
back
even
when we read
referenced
Leviticus.
to, hey, sometime in the future we're going to talk about Mary when she gives her poor offering.
Yep. And so we know that Jesus is coming from extremely humble beginnings
Yeah.
and extremely humble family. But it is pretty neat to see that this is working out.
Something interesting. So I've always appreciated, like I was talking about earlier, I've always appreciated Simeon, and Anna as well. But I really love listening to the words that Simeon would have spoken to Jesus. So again, he was anticipating like the coming of the Messiah for the Lord's people. And one verse that it just like gets me. It kind of feels like we're hearing like some kind of movie trailer or something. It's like these epic words. I'm just gonna read it because it's awesome to me. So in Luke chapter 2 verse 29 to verse 32, it says, Lord, you are now letting your servant depart in peace according to your word. So anticipating that final coming. Then it says, for my eyes have seen your salvation that you have prepared in the presence of all the peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for the glory of all your people. And then what really is like the real kicker is Simeon is talking to Mary in verse 34. Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed. And a sword will pierce through your own soul also, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed. Oh, it's just like so epic. It just sounds so crazy and so cool, but I can't imagine because Simeon's just an old man that knows that Jesus is coming. He's coming and coming. And like finally he says, okay, God, I've seen it. You've shown me what you promised. You can now dismiss your servant in peace. Like, just take me away. I've seen what you promised your people. Like, it's just so cool.
You mentioned too that short little thing about a sword will pierce your own heart or your own soul
Yeah.
is probably a reference to like she's going to have to decide if Jesus really is who she's been told that he is, but also that when he is crucified, like that will be a painful thing for her. So, I like that Jenny's pointing out, like, this is not a Christmas narrative. This is a story that is the foundation of the salvation of our own souls. And it is, I always think, exciting to read these stories outside of the times when we normally read them. Like, I like reading about Easter when it's not Easter. I like reading about Christmas when it's not Christmas.
Well, when you're reading the Bible the way that we have been,
Yep.
This is the next step in the story, and it feels like so needed right here, right now as we're reading. And I don't think I need the Christmas bells to be able to like appreciate this story. So that's really, I don't know, it's kind of earth-shattering. Like,
so it's super exciting to see Jesus hit the scene, to know that he is our salvation, to know that he has arrived in the narrative. We've been looking forward to this moment from the very beginning, and to know that he's here. I just encourage you to be filled with faith because of that, and to be encouraged because of that. Like all these, like Simeon, he didn't know who Jesus was until Jesus showed up. And we know who Jesus is. Like, we have the opportunity to live our entire lives knowing who he is and what he's done for us. So be encouraged in that. The second year part, I would say, is lean into some of these controversies a little bit. You don't have to be a Bible nerd to look into some of this stuff, because if there are people who are going to confront your faith, a lot of times if they're academics, they're going to confront your faith because of these genealogies and how goofy they are. And so I just encourage you not to be afraid to read things. Don't be afraid to read things that make it seem like it's not trustworthy. Don't be afraid to read things that will help you explain exactly why it is trustworthy. But just grow in your knowledge and wisdom of the word, while also growing in your faith and the encouragement that you have from God, because Jesus is here and he is our salvation. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplанyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.